Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a crowded room. Conversations hum around you, laughter breaks out in one corner, a tense argument simmers in another. You glance around, observing faces, tones, gestures. You notice how people connect, how they misunderstand each other, how some dominate and others withdraw. This is the living theater of human psychology, the invisible web of motives, emotions, fears, and instincts that shapes everything we say, everything we do, and everything we are. CHPTR1. Every thought, every decision, every reaction that unfolds within a human being begins long before consciousness notices it. Our behavior is not born in isolation. It is the result of centuries of evolution, countless social interactions, and the silent workings of the human mind. To understand the roots of human behavior, we must look backward and inward, backward to the history that shaped us, and inward to the instincts, emotions, and beliefs that continue to guide us. Imagine the earliest human standing before fire for the first time, frightened, curious, and awestruck. That same mixture of fear and curiosity still lives within us today. Our need for safety, for connection, for meaning, all descend from those primal moments when survival depended on belonging to the tribe and interpreting the world correctly. The roots of behavior are tangled within biology and psychology, woven together in ways that make us both predictable and infinitely complex. Our nervous system, sculpted by evolution, is designed to detect threat, reward, and pattern. When we feel danger, our amygdala fires signals that trigger the ancient fight, flight, or freeze response. When we sense acceptance, our brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, rewarding us with warmth and comfort. Thus, even our simplest emotions, fear, love, anger, joy, are not random feelings. They are ancient instructions written in the body, urging us to survive, to connect, to continue. Yet, behavior does not stop at biology. The social world refines our instincts into habits, norms, and moral codes. From birth, we learn that approval brings comfort and rejection brings pain. We mimic the tone of our parents, the gestures of our friends, and the customs of our culture until they become second nature. A child raised in a peaceful home may grow to associate calmness with safety. Another raised among conflict may equate aggression with control. Thus, the environment sculpts our emotional reactions, layering culture and experience atop biology until the two become inseparable. Every smile, every silence, every decision to speak or stay quiet carries within it the imprint of those early lessons. What we call personality is, in truth, the sum of our biology shaped by experience. The brain, marvelous and mysterious, is both sculptor and clay, constantly changing as it learns. Neuroscientists call this plasticity, the mind's power to reshape itself through thought and experience. This means that while our instincts are ancient, our behavior is never fixed. We adapt, we learn, we evolve. And yet, beneath all our modern complexities, the primitive mind still beats within us. In a boardroom, a courtroom, or a crowded street, the same instincts that once guided hunters and gatherers continue to whisper in our subconscious. We compete for status, seek allies, and fear exclusion, not because society tells us to, but because our brains are wired to survive through belonging. We laugh to show safety, cry to signal need, and mirror others' expressions to create empathy. These subtle acts of connection are echoes of our ancestral code. Understanding this is the first step toward mastery. When you realize that every human, no matter how refined, wealthy, or powerful, is still moved by the same primal emotions, you begin to see behavior as patterns, not mysteries. You stop taking things personally and start perceiving them psychologically. The rude colleague is not attacking you. They are defending their fragile sense of power. The silent friend is not careless. They are protecting themselves from vulnerability. Once you begin to see through this lens, the world transforms from chaos into comprehension. Still, knowledge alone is not enough. Awareness must be paired with compassion. The same instincts that make us fearful and defensive also make us capable of love and kindness. Evolution favored empathy because cooperation ensured survival. The tribe that helped its members endured longer than the one that did not. Empathy is not weakness, it is one of humanity's oldest strengths. To understand behavior, we must honor both sides of our nature, the animal that reacts and the human that reflects. Between those two lies our power, the ability to choose. Unlike our ancestors, who lived at the mercy of instinct, we possess the awareness to pause, to question, to reshape our patterns. A burst of anger can become an act of understanding, fear can become curiosity, instinct can become insight. That transformation begins with observation, the art of watching our own behavior without judgment. Ask yourself, why do I react the way I do? Why do I chase certain goals, avoid certain people, or crave certain approvals? Behind every answer lies a deeper truth about your conditioning. We are not merely products of the past, we are also the authors of our future behavior. When you observe your actions with honesty, you begin to reprogram the subconscious mind, turning unconscious habits into conscious choices. You evolve beyond reaction into mastery. The roots of human behavior, then, are both ancient and ever-renewing. They are found in our biology, our upbringing, our memories, and the invisible architecture of emotion that ties us to every other human being. To study them is not to label people, but to liberate them, to free ourselves from the illusion that we are helpless before our feelings or fated to repeat our past. When we understand the origins of behavior, we gain the wisdom to change it. We see that beneath the surface of every human lies the same desires: to be seen, to be safe, to be significant. The more deeply we grasp this truth, the more gently we walk through the world. For to understand behavior is to understand humanity itself, and that is where mastery begins, not in control, but in comprehension, not in domination, but in awareness. The roots of behavior are the roots of connection, and once we understand them, we begin to see every human interaction, even the most difficult, as an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to evolve beyond instinct into understanding. Chapter 2. The human mind is not a single, simple entity. It is an intricate system, a living network of thoughts, memories, instincts, and emotions all intertwined, each layer influencing the next, each decision born from 1,000 unseen impulses. To understand behavior, one must first understand the architecture of the mind, the invisible structure upon which our consciousness is built. Imagine the mind as a vast mansion with many rooms, some brightly lit, some shadowed and silent. In one room, reason speaks clearly and calmly, calculating choices and weighing outcomes. In another, emotion roars and whispers, shaping perceptions before logic even awakens. Deeper still lies the subconscious, a grand archive of every experience we've ever lived, every sound we've heard, every fear we've felt. Though we cannot always see it, it is this hidden foundation that holds the real power, guiding much of our behavior without us ever realizing it. The conscious mind, the part we identify as I, is only the surface, the visible tip of an iceberg floating atop a vast ocean of subconscious processes. Every thought we think, every opinion we hold, emerges not from thin air but from that submerged depth where memory, instinct, and imagination intermingle. Scientists tell us that our brains process millions of bits of information each second, but our conscious awareness can handle only a tiny fraction of it. The rest flows silently beneath awareness, shaping decisions that we later justify as if they were deliberate choices. The subconscious does not speak in words, but in symbols, sensations, and impulses. It remembers without judging, records without forgetting. It stores the laughter of childhood, the sting of rejection, the comfort of love, and the lessons of survival. When a smell or sound suddenly evokes an emotion, it is the subconscious calling, reminding us of something we thought was lost but still lives within. And yet, above this vast ocean of instinct and memory stands the conscious mind, the architect of awareness. It is the seat of reflection, decision, and will. It allows us to question what we feel, to choose against our impulses, to imagine futures that have not yet come to pass. It is what separates humanity from mere reaction. It gives us the power to think about our thinking. Between these two layers lies another, often overlooked the preconscious, the bridge between awareness and instinct. Here dwell the thoughts not currently in focus but easily recalled, the lyrics of a song you haven't heard in years, the memory of a face, the name on the tip of your tongue. It is the mind's waiting room, where ideas rest until they are called into awareness. The harmony of these layers determines our inner peace. When the conscious mind aligns with the subconscious, when reason and emotion cooperate rather than clash, we feel balanced and clear. But when they fight, when logic says one thing and emotion demands another, the mind becomes a battlefield. We feel torn, confused, restless. The art of psychological mastery lies in understanding this architecture and learning how to harmonize it. We often assume that logic should rule emotion, but that is only half true. Emotion gives logic purpose. It tells reason what to value, what to protect, what to pursue. Without emotion, logic is an empty machine. Without logic, emotion is a storm with no direction. The wise learn to let the two dance, to allow feeling to guide intuition and reason to refine feeling. Deep within this architecture also lies the unconscious, the most mysterious level of all. It is the realm of dreams, archetypes, and universal symbols. It speaks the language of myth and metaphor, connecting every human being through timeless themes: the hero's journey, the struggle between fear and courage, the search for love and belonging. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, the psychic inheritance of all humanity. Whether we realize it or not, this shared depth influences our art, our spirituality, our behavior, and our longing for meaning. It is why certain stories, songs, or images touch us all, transcending time and culture. They speak the ancient language of the unconscious mind. Understanding this architecture transforms how we see ourselves. We begin to realize that thoughts are not always truth, emotions are not always reality, and impulses are not always destiny. We gain perspective. When anger rises, we see it not as who we are but as energy emerging from an older wound or unmet need. When fear whispers, we recognize it as the subconscious trying to protect us from imagined danger. Awareness becomes the key, because what we observe we can manage, what we ignore controls us. The goal then is integration. To integrate the mind is to allow every layer, conscious, subconscious, unconscious, to work in harmony like instruments in an orchestra. The conscious mind sets intention, the subconscious provides fuel, and the unconscious offers wisdom from the depths. When aligned, we move through life with clarity and flow. When one part dominates the rest, we suffer. The overthinker drowns in logic, unable to act. The impulsive drown in emotion, unable to think. The balanced individual listens to both and chooses with awareness. To master this balance, we must first cultivate stillness. Only in quiet can we hear the subtle language of the subconscious. Meditation, reflection, and self-observation open the door between awareness and instinct. They allow the conscious mind to listen rather than command, to understand rather than suppress. The mind is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a system to be understood. Each emotion, each thought, each impulse is a message from within, a signal pointing toward growth or healing. The architecture of the mind is not static, it is alive, evolving with every experience, reshaping itself in response to what we learn and feel. Every act of awareness rewires it, every insight strengthens it, every moment of mindfulness rebuilds its foundation. To know this is to gain profound power, the power to direct your own evolution. You are not just a passenger of thought. You are the architect of consciousness itself. The mind is both the house and the inhabitant, both the creator and the creation. Once you understand its design, you begin to master your own reality. You realize that life does not happen to you. It happens through you, shaped by the architecture you carry within. And that architecture, once understood, can be redesigned to build a stronger, calmer, and more awakened self. HTR3 Every human being carries within them a unique constellation of traits, tendencies, and emotional patterns that together form what we call personality, the living mirror of the self. It is the invisible signature that shapes how we think, feel, and behave, and it determines how we see the world and how the world sees us. Personality is not merely what we show others, it is the story of who we are beneath the surface, the accumulated reflection of our genetics, our experiences, our beliefs, and our choices. Imagine two people standing before the same storm. One sees adventure, the other sees danger. One laughs, the other trembles. The event is the same, but the mind interpreting it is different. That difference is personality. It is the lens through which all reality passes, tinting everything we perceive with shades of our own emotions, memories, and meanings. Psychologists have long sought to decode this mysterious structure. From Carl Jung's archetypes to the modern five-factor model, personality has been understood as both nature and nurture, half written in our DNA and half shaped by the experiences that teach us who we are. We are born with a temperament, a certain emotional rhythm, but as we grow, life chisels that raw material into the sculpture of individuality. Every triumph adds confidence, every wound adds caution, every relationship leaves fingerprints on our character. Over time, these layers form a pattern, and that pattern becomes the person we call me. At its core, personality can be seen as the dynamic interplay between our inner self and the external world. Some of us are naturally drawn outward, seeking stimulation and connection, the extroverts who thrive on energy and engagement. Others turn inward, finding peace in thought and solitude, the introverts who recharge in reflection. Neither is better, both are essential expressions of human diversity. Extroversion gives color to social life, introversion gives depth to inner life. Alongside this polarity, other dimensions dance within us: openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, emotional stability, and creativity. These traits are not boxes that confine us, but spectrums that shift with time and circumstance. A person may be bold in one environment and cautious in another, kind in peace and fierce in crisis. The secret of understanding personality lies not in labeling people, but in perceiving the fluidity of their inner nature. Yet personality is not only a psychological pattern, it is a defense, a mask, a mirror, and sometimes a prison. We build parts of it to protect ourselves from pain. A child who learns that love is conditional may grow into an adult who hides vulnerability behind humor or control. A person who once felt powerless may construct an identity of dominance to never feel small again. These adaptations are not false, they are intelligent responses to experience. But when we forget that they are masks, we begin to mistake them for our true face. The shy person may forget they are capable of courage, the proud person may forget they were once afraid. Thus, self-awareness becomes the doorway to personality mastery, the courage to look into the mirror of the self and see what lies beneath the reflection. The mirror reveals many things: our patterns of thinking, our emotional triggers, our habits of defense. It shows how we react to criticism, how we chase approval, how we define success. Most people spend their lives looking outward, judging and comparing, never realizing that every judgment they make reveals more about themselves than about others. The angry person exposes their own wound. The jealous person exposes their own insecurity. The compassionate person reveals their own peace. Personality, then, is not static. It is a living dialogue between the conscious and the subconscious, between who we think we are and who we truly are. When we become aware of this dialogue, we can begin to shape it intentionally. True growth begins when we stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" Because personality, though shaped by the past, is rewritten in every moment by the choices we make. The person who was once impatient can learn patience. The one who was fearful can practice courage. The one who was selfish can awaken empathy. Every act of awareness rewires the self. Neuroscience confirms this. The brain's plasticity allows us to form new pathways of thought, emotion, and behavior at any age. What we repeat, we become. Thus, personality is not fate. It is a living creation. Still, beneath the layers of change lies something constant, the core self, the quiet observer behind all experience. This self is not the mask we wear, but the awareness that notices the mask. It is the consciousness that watches thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, memories fade and return. It is that existed before titles, roles, and identities. When we touch this core, even for a moment, we feel clarity, a stillness untouched by comparison or judgment. From that stillness, personality becomes a tool, not a trap. We can use it to express love, creativity, purpose. We can choose when to be firm, when to be soft, when to lead, when to listen. The mind ceases to be a battleground of conflicting traits and becomes a garden of balanced strengths. To master personality is not to eliminate imperfection, but to understand it. Each flaw hides a need, and each need hides wisdom. The stubborn learn persistence, the anxious learn sensitivity, the prideful learn confidence. When we integrate these opposites, we become whole. We no longer resist our nature but refine it. We recognize that darkness and light coexist in every human being, and that maturity lies not in denying either, but in harmonizing both. A wise person does not seek to become someone else, they seek to become fully themselves. Personality, then, is the art of self-expression guided by self-awareness. It is the bridge between our inner truth and the outer world. When we understand our own patterns, we begin to understand others, their fears, their motives, their longings. We see that everyone is acting from a story written by their past, and that compassion is born from recognizing this shared struggle, to look into another's eyes and see not their behavior but their humanity. That is the highest form of social intelligence. In the end, personality is not fixed marble but living clay. We are sculptors and sculptures at once, forever shaping and reshaping ourselves through thought, emotion, and experience. Each day gives us the chance to polish the mirror of the self, to see more clearly who we are and who we can become. When we embrace this truth, life ceases to be a competition of personalities and becomes a journey of awakening, a realization that beneath all our differences, every self is seeking the same thing: to understand itself, to express its truth, and to be accepted for who it truly is. Chapter 4. Emotion is the heartbeat of human existence, the silent force that drives our thoughts, choices, and actions long before logic enters the stage. It is the invisible current that flows through every word we speak, every decision we make, every connection we form. To understand emotion is to understand the pulse of life itself. Many believe that reason governs behavior, yet in truth, emotion leads and reason follows. We do not think our way into feeling, we feel our way into thinking. Every joy, every sorrow, every burst of anger or wave of love begins as an energy in motion, a vibration within the body that shapes how we perceive the world. The word emotion itself comes from the Latin emovere, meaning to move out. And indeed, emotions move us, to act, to speak, to create, to destroy. They are the bridge between body and mind, between the physical and the psychological, between the self and the world. From birth, emotion is our first language. Long before we speak words, we cry to signal need, smile to invite connection, frown to reject discomfort. The infant does not analyze, it feels. And though we grow, learn, and develop intellect, the emotional core remains the same. It seeks safety, love, belonging, and understanding. Every adult emotion, no matter how complex, can be traced back to these primal roots. Anger hides fear. Pride masks insecurity. Sadness reveals attachment. Behind every feeling lies a message, an unmet need, a threatened value, or a memory echoing through time. Yet most people live unaware of this hidden communication. They resist unpleasant feelings, suppress their sadness, deny their fear, and mistake control for strength. But what we resist persists. Emotion, when ignored, does not disappear. It sinks deeper, shaping behavior from the shadows. Unacknowledged anger becomes bitterness. Repressed grief hardens into apathy. Suppressed fear disguises itself as arrogance or control. True mastery begins not in suppressing emotion, but in understanding it. The power of emotion lies not only in its intensity, but in its intelligence. Each emotion carries wisdom. Fear protects us from danger. Anger signals injustice or boundary violation. Sadness teaches us to let go. Joy shows us alignment with our deepest values. Even shame and guilt, though painful, guide us back toward integrity and empathy. Emotions are not enemies to be conquered. they are messengers to be heard. When we listen without judgment, emotion becomes a compass pointing toward healing and growth. Imagine emotion as weather passing through the sky of consciousness. Clouds of anger, storms of grief, sunlight of joy. None of them define the sky, they simply pass through it. But most people, instead of observing, become lost in the storm. They mistake the temporary emotion for their identity. I am angry. I am sad. I am broken. In truth, you are not your emotions. You are the awareness that experiences them. The more you identify with awareness rather than reaction, the freer you become. Emotion also connects us to one another. Long before language, our ancestors survived by reading emotional cues. The widening of eyes, the tremor in a voice, the softness of a smile. Empathy evolved as a survival tool, allowing us to feel what others felt so we could cooperate and protect the tribe. That same empathy still governs our modern interactions. A leader who senses the mood of the room, a friend who feels your pain without words, a parent who soothes a crying child, all are guided by emotional attunement. Emotional intelligence, therefore, is not merely knowing how to manage your feelings, but how to perceive and respond to the emotions of others with balance and compassion. It is the art of harmonizing the inner world with the outer. However, emotions can also enslave when misunderstood. The person ruled by anger becomes destructive, the one trapped in fear becomes paralyzed, the one lost in sadness becomes hopeless. The difference between being moved by emotion and being mastered by it lies in awareness. Emotion asks to be felt, not obeyed. To feel anger is human. To let it dictate cruelty is blindness. To feel fear is natural. To let it prevent growth is surrender. The wise do not suppress or indulge emotion. They observe it, understand it, and channel it constructively. They turn anger into assertiveness, fear into caution, sadness into wisdom, and joy into gratitude. In this way, emotion becomes alchemy, transforming raw energy into conscious action. Physiologically, emotions are energy patterns coursing through the nervous system. Every emotion triggers chemical responses: adrenaline in anger, cortisol in stress, oxytocin in love, dopamine in joy. These chemicals influence the heartbeat, the breath, the muscles. That is why emotion feels physical. Your chest tightens with fear, your face warms with embarrassment, your stomach knots with anxiety. But here lies the secret. Because emotions are physical, they can be regulated through the body. Deep breathing, mindful movement, or simple awareness can interrupt the body's stress cycle and calm the emotional storm. The body and mind are not separate. They are one continuous field of communication. When you calm the body, you calm the mind. When you understand the emotion, you free the body. Another profound truth about emotion is its contagious nature. We catch feelings from others just as we catch colds. Spend time with anxious people and your heart rate rises. Sit with joyful people and your spirit lifts. This phenomenon, called emotional contagion, explains why collective moods can shift entire communities. Why riots spread, why laughter fills a room, why calm leaders inspire peace. Therefore, to master emotion is also to take responsibility for the emotional energy you radiate. Every word, every gesture, every expression transmits feeling. When you carry peace, you give peace. When you radiate fear, you multiply it. Awareness of this power turns emotion from reaction into influence. Ultimately, the power of emotion lies in its dual nature. It can imprison or liberate, wound or heal, destroy or create. The key lies in mindfulness, the ability to pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, awareness transforms reaction into choice. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you begin to say, "Anger is arising within me." That small shift in language expands consciousness. You are no longer inside the emotion, you are observing it. And in observation, emotion loses its grip. It becomes a wave you can surf rather than a storm that drowns you. Emotions are the language of the soul, the music beneath thought. They are not flaws in our design, but evidence of our humanity. To feel deeply is not weakness. It is the raw material of wisdom. Those who suppress emotion cut themselves off from vitality, but those who understand emotion become artists of life. sculpting experience with awareness and grace. The more we honor our feelings without being enslaved by them, the more authentic, empathetic, and powerful we become. In mastering emotion, we master the rhythm of existence itself, learning when to move, when to rest, when to release, and when to rise. Emotion, when understood, becomes not a burden but a guide, leading us gently toward truth, connection, and inner freedom. Chapter 5. Every great achievement, every dream pursued, every invention born of human imagination begins with one invisible spark: motivation. It is the inner fire that compels us to act, the unseen energy that drives the mind and body toward a goal. Without motivation, even the most talented individual remains stagnant. With it, the ordinary can achieve the extraordinary. Yet few truly understand what motivation is or how it works. We often speak of it as a feeling, a surge of excitement or a burst of inspiration, but in truth, motivation is not a fleeting emotion. It is a complex psychological process, a dialogue between desire, belief, and purpose. It is the bridge between thought and action, between what we dream and what we do. To understand motivation is to understand the very engine of human behavior. Every person on earth is driven by something: a need to survive, a longing to belong, a desire to create, a hunger to matter. These motives are the silent architects of our daily lives, shaping how we spend our time, how we relate to others, and how we define success. At its most primal level, motivation begins with biological needs: the body's demand for food, water, rest, and safety. This is survival motivation, the foundation of all human behavior. But as those needs are met, higher layers of desire emerge: the need for love, for esteem, for meaning. Psychologist Abraham Maslow described this beautifully in his hierarchy of needs, showing how human motivation ascends from physical survival to spiritual fulfillment. We strive first to exist, then to belong, then to matter, and finally to transcend. Yet life is rarely linear. We often move between these layers, at times driven by hunger or fear, at others by creativity or purpose. Understanding which level of need is driving us at a given moment gives us insight into our own behavior and that of others. But beneath these needs lies another force: emotion. Every motive begins as an emotional impulse. We act because something feels rewarding or relieving. We seek pleasure and avoid pain, chase validation, or pursue peace. This emotional current is ancient, built into our nervous system to ensure survival. The brain releases dopamine, the chemical of motivation, whenever we anticipate a reward. But here lies the paradox: dopamine does not flow when we achieve something, it flows in the anticipation of achieving it. This means that motivation lies not in success itself, but in the pursuit of it. We are wired not to rest in completion, but to keep moving toward new goals. That is why, even after achieving something significant, we soon crave the next challenge. The journey fuels us more than the destination. However, not all motivation is created equal. Psychologists distinguish between two main types: intrinsic and extrinsic. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards: money, praise, status. Intrinsic motivation arises from within: curiosity, growth, joy, love for the process itself. While extrinsic rewards can inspire short bursts of effort, they rarely sustain long-term fulfillment. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, turns work into passion and effort into art. When we do something not because we have to, but because we love to, we tap into a deeper energy that never runs dry. True mastery, creativity, and innovation are born from intrinsic motivation, from the simple joy of learning, building, or expressing oneself. Yet the modern world often confuses motivation with pressure. We are told to stay motivated, to hustle, to never stop, as if constant drive were the measure of worth. But real motivation is not noise, it is direction. It is not the frantic push of anxiety, but the steady pull of purpose. When we chase goals that are not aligned with our values, motivation turns to exhaustion. When we act from fear of failure rather than love of growth, we burn out. The secret is alignment, finding goals that resonate with who we are at our core. When our actions reflect our deepest values, motivation flows effortlessly like a river following its natural course. Purpose transforms effort into devotion. To understand motivation, we must also understand its enemies: procrastination, fear, and doubt. Procrastination is not laziness, it is resistance. It arises when there is a gap between what we want and what we believe we can achieve. The mind avoids action not because it lacks desire, but because it fears failure, rejection, or uncertainty. Overcoming procrastination, therefore, is not about forcing yourself to act. It is about reducing the inner friction between desire and belief. When you strengthen belief, action follows naturally. Confidence, then, is not arrogance, it is clarity. It is the quiet understanding that you are capable of progress, even if not perfection. Another profound insight into motivation comes from self-determination theory, which identifies three essential needs that fuel lasting motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the sense of choice, feeling that you are the author of your actions. Competence is the feeling of effectiveness, knowing your efforts make a difference. Relatedness is connection, feeling that your actions matter to others. When these three needs are met, motivation becomes self-sustaining. You do not need to be pushed. You are pulled by the joy of growth itself. However, motivation also requires balance between discipline and emotion. Discipline is the skeleton of motivation, emotion is its blood. Without discipline, desire remains a dream. Without emotion, discipline becomes drudgery. The greatest achievers are not those who never lose motivation, but those who have learned how to create it, how to act even when they do not feel like it. Motivation is not found, it is generated. It begins with small action. Action creates progress, progress creates emotion, and emotion creates more motivation. Thus, the cycle of momentum is born. But beyond science and psychology, motivation has a spiritual dimension, the call of the soul toward growth. Every person carries an inner purpose, a longing to evolve into their fullest potential. When we ignore that call, life feels empty no matter how successful we appear. When we answer it, even small steps feel meaningful. Motivation, then, becomes not merely about achievement but about alignment, aligning our actions with our truth. It is the bridge between who we are and who we are meant to become. In the end, the psychology of motivation teaches us that willpower alone is not enough. To stay motivated, we must nourish the mind, body, and soul. We must rest, reflect, and reconnect to purpose. We must learn to celebrate progress rather than perfection. Motivation thrives in environments of hope, vision. It dies in comparison, fear, and self-judgment. When we act from purpose, motivation ceases to be a struggle, it becomes a state of flow. Every challenge becomes an opportunity, every setback a lesson, every effort a step closer to meaning. The mind moves, the heart follows, and the journey itself becomes the reward. Motivation, then, is not just the force that drives us forward. It is the very essence of being alive, the quiet whisper of life urging us to grow, to move. Chapter 6. The human mind is a masterpiece of complexity, capable of imagination, logic, memory, yet it is also riddled with invisible errors that distort how we see the world and ourselves. These distortions, known as cognitive biases, are the hidden shortcuts of the brain, designed to help us make quick decisions, but often leading us into misunderstanding and false judgment. Cognitive biases are not flaws of intelligence, but features of evolution, the brain's way of simplifying reality so we can survive its chaos. Thousands of years ago, these shortcuts kept our ancestors alive by allowing them to react quickly to danger or uncertainty. But in the modern world, where the threats are no longer predators but perceptions, these same mental habits can sabotage relationships, decisions, and emotional well-being. Every human being, no matter how rational they believe themselves to be, is influenced by these invisible forces. They shape our beliefs, guide our behaviors, and color every judgment we make, from what we buy to whom we trust, to how we interpret our past. One of the most powerful and pervasive of these biases is the confirmation bias, the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe, while ignoring evidence that challenges it. This bias turns the mind into an echo chamber, where we mistake agreement for truth and opinion for fact. It is why people become trapped in their own perspectives, defending beliefs even when they no longer serve them. Confirmation bias feeds on comfort. It gives us the illusion of certainty in a world of uncertainty. The truth, however, often lives in contradiction. Only those who can tolerate the discomfort of being wrong ever truly grow. The antidote to this bias is intellectual humility, the willingness to question one's own assumptions and to listen, not to reply, but to understand. Another powerful trap is the availability heuristic, where the mind judges the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Because dramatic or emotional events are easier to recall, we overestimate their frequency. We fear airplane crashes more than car accidents, even though the latter are far more common. We believe the world is more violent because we see violence in the news, forgetting that peace rarely makes headlines. This bias distorts our perception of risk and makes us prisoners of vivid memory rather than objective truth. Awareness of this bias invites us to pause before reacting to fear, to seek data before drawing conclusions, and to remember that what is memorable is not always what is meaningful. Then there is the anchoring bias, where the mind clings to the first piece of information it receives as a reference point for all subsequent judgments. In negotiations, the first price mentioned shapes the entire discussion. In relationships, the first impression often defines how we interpret every future action. Anchors create mental inertia. Once our mind settles on a reference, it resists moving away from it. This is why open-mindedness requires conscious effort. We must learn to unanchor ourselves, to release the weight of first impressions, and allow new evidence to reshape our understanding. Perhaps one of the most subtle yet damaging biases is the self-serving bias, the tendency to attribute our successes to personal skill and our failures to external factors. When things go well, we say, "I worked hard." When they go poorly, we say, "It wasn't my fault." This bias protects the ego from pain but prevents it from growth. To take full responsibility for both success and failure is to reclaim power over one's life. The mature mind understands that self-compassion is not the same as self-deception. We can forgive ourselves without denying our role in our circumstances. There is also the halo effect, where our overall impression of a person influences how we perceive their individual traits. When someone is attractive or confident, we unconsciously assume they are also intelligent, kind, or trustworthy. This illusion governs hiring decisions, friendships, and even justice. The opposite is true as well. One negative trait can overshadow many virtues. The halo effect reminds us that perception is not truth, it is interpretation. True wisdom lies in seeing people as they are, not as we project them to be. Another insidious trap is the status quo bias, the emotional attachment to what is familiar. Humans prefer the comfort of known discomfort over the anxiety of change. We stay in unfulfilling jobs, toxic relationships, or outdated beliefs simply because they are familiar. Change feels threatening even when it promises freedom. This bias explains why revolutions, both personal and societal, require courage, the courage to step beyond habit and into uncertainty. Growth demands that we confront this bias by embracing discomfort as the birthplace of transformation. The bandwagon effect is another bias that shapes societies and cultures, the tendency to adopt beliefs simply because others do. In the age of social media, where opinions spread faster than reflection, this bias is amplified. We confuse popularity with truth, noise with knowledge, and consensus with wisdom. The individual mind dissolves into the crowd, and thinking becomes imitation. To resist the bandwagon effect is to reclaim individuality, to think independently, even when it means standing alone. The price of truth is often solitude, but that solitude is the seed of authenticity. Then comes the negativity bias, perhaps the most powerful of all. The human brain is wired to notice and remember negative experiences more strongly than positive ones. This was once a survival advantage. Those who remembered danger lived longer. But in the modern world it breeds anxiety, pessimism, and resentment. We may receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, yet it is the criticism that echoes in our mind. The key to overcoming negativity bias is not to deny pain but to balance it with gratitude. By consciously focusing on what is good, we retrain the brain to perceive a fuller picture of reality. Other biases, like the sunk cost fallacy, where we continue investing in something because we have already invested so much, or the illusion of control, where we believe we can influence outcomes that are truly random, all reveal one fundamental truth: the human mind prefers coherence over accuracy. We want the world to make sense, even if we must distort it to fit our narrative. These distortions give temporary comfort, but long-term confusion. To master the mind, we must learn to see these biases not as enemies but as teachers. Each bias exposes a weakness of perception that can become a strength through awareness. The first step in escaping mental traps is noticing them. The moment we recognize a bias at work, when we catch ourselves assuming, overreacting, or clinging, we awaken. Awareness breaks the illusion. The mind cannot control what it refuses to see, but once it sees clearly, control becomes possible. The second step is humility, accepting that we are not purely rational creatures but emotional ones. The third step is curiosity, the willingness to test our thoughts rather than defend them. When we learn to question our certainties, we replace arrogance with wisdom. Ultimately, cognitive biases remind us that perception is not reality, it is only a version of it. Every human being lives in a slightly different psychological world, filtered through belief, memory, and emotion. True social intelligence, therefore, is not about being right, but about being aware that every opinion, including our own, is shaped by invisible mental habits. The mind is both the architect and the illusionist of our reality. To know this is to begin the lifelong journey from ignorance to insight, from automatic reaction to conscious understanding. And in that awareness lies the first step toward true freedom. The freedom to see the world as it is, not merely as our mind imagines it to be. Chapter 7. In the intricate web of human relationships, it is not the sharpness of intellect nor the eloquence of words that defines our success, but rather the depth of emotional intelligence. The ability to understand, manage, and respond to emotions, both within ourselves and in others. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the quiet force that guides our interactions, the compass that steers us through the unpredictable sea of human behavior. It is what allows us to stay calm in conflict, compassionate in chaos, and connected in a world that often feels disconnected. While traditional intelligence measures how well we think, emotional intelligence measures how well we feel, and more importantly, how well we handle those feelings. It is the foundation of empathy, leadership, communication, and inner peace. To master it is to master the art of being human, for emotions, when understood, become the greatest instruments of connection, but when ignored, they become instruments of destruction. The essence of emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness, the capacity to recognize our own emotions as they arise, and to understand their impact on our thoughts and behavior. Most people are driven not by conscious choice but by unconscious emotion. Anger, fear, jealousy, or pride quietly dictate their words and actions, leaving them reactive rather than reflective. Self-awareness transforms this chaos into clarity. It is the ability to pause and ask, "What am I feeling and why?" It is the inner mirror that reveals the truth of our emotional state without judgment. A self-aware person does not suppress emotion, they study it. They know that every feeling carries a message. Anger signals a boundary crossed. Sadness reveals a loss, joy highlights alignment, and anxiety exposes uncertainty. To understand emotion is to decode the language of the soul. Once self-awareness blooms, the next pillar of emotional intelligence emerges: self-regulation. This is not the suppression of feeling, but the management of it. It is the ability to hold emotion without being consumed by it, to respond rather than react. Imagine a storm passing over a lake. If the surface is calm, it reflects the sky. If it is disturbed, it distorts it. The emotionally intelligent person learns to still the waters of their mind, not by denying the storm, but by centering beneath it. Self-regulation gives us control over our impulses, patience in provocation, and grace under pressure. It teaches us that power does not come from domination, but from composure. To regulate emotion is to reclaim agency over our own energy, to decide consciously how we will act rather than letting the moment decide for us. But emotional intelligence is not only inward-looking, it expands outward into the realm of empathy, the ability to sense and share the feelings of others. Empathy is not sympathy. It is not pity from a distance, but understanding from within. It is the art of stepping into another's emotional world without losing the center of your own. When we practice empathy, we listen beyond words to tone, silence, and expression. We see beneath behavior to the need that drives it. The angry person is often afraid, the distant person often hurt, the arrogant person often insecure. Empathy allows us to see the child within the adult, the wound behind the wall. In doing so, we transform judgment into compassion. Society teaches us to win arguments, but empathy teaches us to win hearts. And hearts, once understood, rarely resist truth. Empathy also enhances communication, the lifeline of human connection. Words are powerful, but emotions give them meaning. Emotional intelligence helps us choose our words not for effect, but for understanding. It helps us read the emotional temperature of a room, to sense tension before it erupts, to know when to speak and when to listen. The emotionally intelligent communicator listens to understand, not to reply. They are present, not distracted, curious, not defensive. In this way, conversations become bridges rather than battlegrounds. Relationships flourish where emotional intelligence is present because people feel seen, heard, and respected, the three basic needs of every human soul. Emotional intelligence also plays a central role in leadership. A leader who understands emotion inspires loyalty, not obedience. They recognize that people are not machines to be managed, but beings to be motivated. The best leaders lead not through authority, but through authenticity. By showing empathy, integrity, and humility, they know how to balance firmness with compassion, vision with listening, and power with empathy. Emotional intelligence in leadership is the ability to influence without intimidation, to guide without ego, and to serve without losing direction. Such leaders build trust, and trust is the currency of every successful team, family, or society. However, emotional intelligence is not innate perfection. It is a skill cultivated through awareness, reflection, and practice. It requires vulnerability, the courage to face one's emotions without fear. Many people mistake emotional control for emotional numbness, but true intelligence of the heart is not coldness. It is warmth under wisdom's guidance. To feel deeply yet remain grounded is the highest form of strength. It is easy to close one's heart in the name of protection. It is harder to keep it open in the face of pain. Yet openness is the very essence of emotional maturity. When we learn to feel without being overwhelmed, to love without attachment, and to empathize without losing ourselves, we become emotionally free. Modern psychology and neuroscience confirm what ancient wisdom long knew, that emotion and reason are not enemies but partners. The brain's emotional center, the amygdala, communicates constantly with the prefrontal cortex, where rational thinking occurs. When these two are balanced, decision-making becomes clear and compassionate. But when emotion overrides logic, we react impulsively. When logic suppresses emotion, we become detached. Emotional intelligence is the art of harmony between heart and mind, the ability to think with feeling and feel with thought. This harmony leads to better mental health, stronger relationships, and greater resilience in the face of adversity. Empathy, when applied in daily life, becomes a transformative force. It can dissolve conflict, heal relationships, and even unite divided communities. In a world where people often talk more than they listen, empathy is revolutionary. It requires us to look beyond difference, to find common humanity in the eyes of another. When empathy becomes action, when understanding becomes kindness, when compassion becomes support, Emotional intelligence becomes more than a concept, it becomes a way of living. Every act of patience, every moment of understanding, every word spoken with care strengthens the invisible fabric of connection that holds humanity together. Ultimately, emotional intelligence and empathy remind us that beneath the complexity of human behavior lies a simple truth: everyone wants to feel valued, understood, and safe. When we cultivate emotional intelligence, we stop reacting to the surface and begin responding to the soul. We stop fighting to be right and start striving to be kind. We discover that the greatest intelligence is not found in knowing everything but in understanding everyone, including ourselves. And in this understanding, we find the power to create harmony within and around us. Emotional intelligence is not just a skill, it is the language of connection, the bridge between mind and heart, and the key to mastering the human experience. Our 8 human beings, though often convinced of their individuality, are profoundly shaped by the invisible hands of social influence. From the way we dress, speak, and believe, to the choices we make and the causes we defend, our behavior is continuously molded by the presence, opinions, and expectations of others. Social influence is the psychological gravity that binds societies together. It gives rise to culture, cooperation, and belonging, yet it can also lead to conformity, manipulation, and collective blindness. The study of social influence reveals one of the most fascinating truths about human behavior: that we are not isolated minds, but interconnected organisms, constantly influencing and being influenced. Persuasion, then, is the conscious art of guiding this influence, the ability to shape perception, inspire action, and change belief through communication, emotion, and trust. Those who understand the psychology of influence wield immense power, for they can move hearts, redirect thought, and reshape entire societies, not through force, but through understanding. The roots of social influence run deep into our evolutionary history. Our ancestors survived not as solitary hunters, but as members of tribes, where acceptance meant protection and rejection meant danger. The brain evolved to read social cues with precision, to conform when necessary, and to detect approval or disapproval as signals of safety or threat. Even today, this ancient wiring governs our behavior in subtle ways. We laugh when others laugh, fear when others fear, and adopt the emotions of those around us without conscious choice. This phenomenon, known as emotional contagion, is the foundation of empathy and group cohesion, but it also explains why moods spread like fire in crowds, workplaces, and even online spaces. To be human is to be suggestible. We are constantly absorbing and reflecting the mental states of others. Awareness of this truth is the first step to mastering influence, both in resisting it and using it ethically. Psychologists identify 3 primary forms of social influence: compliance, identification, and internalization. Compliance occurs when we change behavior to gain approval or avoid punishment, even if we disagree internally. Identification happens when we adopt the beliefs or behaviors of someone we admire or wish to emulate, a mentor, celebrity, or leader. Internalization is the deepest level, where the influenced belief becomes truly our own, integrated into our values and worldview. The art of persuasion seeks to guide this process, not through coercion but through alignment, aligning ideas with existing values, emotions, and needs. True persuasion does not overpower the mind, it harmonizes with it. The science of persuasion, as explored by Robert Cialdini and others, rests on several key principles that operate universally across cultures. The first is reciprocity, the instinctive urge to return a favor. When someone gives to us, even something small like a compliment or gesture of kindness, we feel an unconscious obligation to give back. This principle, when used ethically, builds trust and goodwill. When exploited, it becomes manipulation. The second principle is commitment and consistency, the desire to appear stable and reliable in our actions and beliefs. Once we commit publicly to a stance, we are more likely to follow through, even if new evidence arises. Savvy persuaders use this by asking for small initial commitments that pave the way for larger ones. The third principle is social proof, the tendency to look to others for guidance when uncertain. We assume that if many people believe or do something, it must be correct. This principle explains why trends spread, why reviews shape behavior, and why crowds can both enlighten and mislead. Another powerful principle is authority, our deep-seated respect for perceived expertise. From childhood, we are conditioned to obey teachers, parents, and leaders. When someone appears knowledgeable or confident, we often accept their words without question. Authority, when earned through integrity, can inspire. When faked through image, it can deceive. The next principle, liking, reminds us that we are more easily persuaded by those we like, people who are warm, relatable, and similar to us. Charisma, therefore, is not about dominance but resonance. It is the ability to make others feel understood. Finally, scarcity amplifies desire. When something seems rare or limited, we value it more. This bias operates both in marketing and in relationships. We chase what seems exclusive and neglect what seems abundant. Yet persuasion extends beyond these principles into the realm of narrative and emotion. Facts inform, but stories transform. The human brain is wired to think in stories, to find meaning in cause and effect, to connect emotionally to characters and outcomes. A skilled persuader does not bombard with data, they craft a narrative that engages the listener's imagination and values. They appeal not just to logic but to identity, answering the unspoken question every person asks, "What does this mean for me?" Emotion, not reason, drives most decisions. Reason justifies them afterward. That is why the greatest persuaders, from teachers to leaders to visionaries, do not argue, they evoke. They make people feel before they think, and in that feeling, belief begins to shift. However, influence carries ethical responsibility. The same psychology that can inspire peace can also incite violence. The same charisma that can heal communities can also manipulate minds. History is filled with examples of both. Ethical persuasion respects autonomy. It seeks to awaken awareness, not control it. It invites choice, not obedience. To influence ethically is to guide with empathy, to speak truth with clarity, and to serve a purpose larger than self-interest. True persuasion does not enslave minds. It liberates them from confusion by illuminating new perspectives. Social influence also explains how cultures evolve. Every movement begins as a ripple, an idea held by a few that gradually spreads through influence and imitation until it becomes a norm. Innovation itself depends on persuasion, for every new idea must first overcome resistance from the old. The pioneers of progress, reformers, inventors, artists, were not just creators but persuaders who moved minds before they moved the world. Understanding influence allows us to become conscious participants in this process rather than passive followers. We begin to question trends, evaluate messages, and shape our own voice in a chorus of noise. In the age of social media, influence has become both democratized and distorted. The power once held by institutions now rests in the hands of individuals who can reach millions with a single post. Yet this amplification has blurred the line between persuasion and manipulation, authenticity and performance. Algorithms feed our biases, echo our beliefs, and subtly steer our behavior. To maintain psychological freedom, we must cultivate awareness, to ask, who benefits from this message? What emotion is it triggering? What assumption is it shaping? Awareness transforms influence from a force that controls us into one we can consciously navigate. Ultimately, the power of social influence and persuasion lies in understanding that every interaction is an exchange of energy. Every word, gesture, and emotion sends a signal that can either uplift or diminish another. To master influence is not to dominate others, but to elevate them, to communicate in a way that brings clarity, motivation, and connection. The greatest persuaders are not manipulators but mentors. They do not impose ideas but awaken insight. They understand that influence is not about changing minds, but about touching hearts. And once the heart changes, the mind naturally follows. In the symphony of human interaction, persuasion is the melody that harmonizes individual thought with collective vision. When used with wisdom, empathy, and integrity, it becomes one of the most powerful forces for good. The art of inspiring others to see more, feel deeper, and become better than they were before. Chapter 9. Human relationships are the heartbeat of existence, the invisible web that sustains meaning, joy, and growth in our lives. From birth to death, we are shaped by the bonds we form, with parents, friends, lovers, mentors, and even strangers. And it is through these connections that we come to know not only others but ourselves. Relationships are mirrors, reflecting the truth of who we are through the reactions, emotions, and patterns they evoke. The dynamics that govern them are complex, delicate, and deeply psychological, rooted in both our primal instincts and our higher consciousness. To understand relationships is to understand the very essence of humanity. For love, trust, and belonging are not luxuries, they are as vital to our well-being as air and water. The science of human connection teaches us that while intellect may build systems, it is emotion that builds bridges. Every interaction, no matter how brief, leaves an imprint on our inner world, subtly shaping how we think, feel, and relate. The quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives, and yet, many of us enter relationships without understanding the invisible forces that drive them. At the core of every relationship lies a psychological exchange, a flow of energy, attention, and emotion. Whether it is the nurturing bond between parent and child, or the passionate dance between lovers, connection depends on a balance between giving and receiving, autonomy and intimacy. When this balance tilts too far in one direction, relationships begin to strain. Too much dependence suffocates, too much distance starves. The healthiest relationships are not built on perfection but on mutual respect and emotional safety. A shared space where both people feel free to be their authentic selves. Emotional safety arises from trust, and trust is the slow, deliberate accumulation of consistent truth. It cannot be rushed, demanded, or faked. It grows when words match actions, when empathy replaces ego, and when both parties choose understanding over judgment. The psychology of attachment, first explored by John Bowlby, reveals how our earliest relationships shape our patterns of connection for life. The child who experienced consistent love and safety develops a secure attachment, the ability to trust, to love, and to be loved without fear. But those who grew up in environments of neglect, inconsistency, or rejection may carry anxious or avoidant attachment styles into adulthood. The anxiously attached person fears abandonment and often seeks excessive reassurance. The avoidant one fears vulnerability and distances themselves from intimacy. These patterns play out unconsciously, shaping how we communicate, fight, forgive, and bond. The journey to healthy connection begins with awareness, recognizing our attachment style, and healing the wounds that drive our relational behavior. When we understand our emotional blueprint, we gain the power to rewrite it. Communication lies at the heart of all connection, yet most communication fails not because of what is said, but because of what is not understood. Words are only the surface. Tone, body language, and intention carry the deeper message. To connect deeply, one must listen beyond language, to the emotion beneath the words, to the silence between them. Listening is not waiting to speak, it is creating space for another's truth to exist. Genuine listening validates existence. It tells the other person, "You matter." The emotionally intelligent communicator knows that empathy is more powerful than advice, and presence is more healing than correction. True connection does not require agreement, it requires understanding. Conflict, often feared, is not the enemy of connection but its catalyst for growth. Every disagreement reveals differences in perspective, need, or value. When approached with awareness, conflict becomes an opportunity to deepen understanding. But when handled with defensiveness or blame, it breeds resentment and distance. The key lies in how we respond, whether we seek to win or to understand. The ego wants victory, the heart seeks resolution. The most fulfilling relationships are not those without conflict, but those where both individuals learn to fight fairly, to communicate boundaries with respect, and to forgive without losing self-respect. Forgiveness, contrary to misconception, is not the erasure of pain but the release of its control. It is the conscious choice to free oneself from the past to make room for connection in the present. Healthy relationships also require individuality, the paradox of unity and independence. To love deeply, one must first stand firmly as oneself. Many relationships falter when people lose their sense of identity in the name of love, mistaking attachment for connection. True intimacy does not dissolve individuality, it celebrates it. It is two whole beings walking side by side, not two halves seeking completion. Dependency breeds fear, while interdependence breeds strength. Love that grows from freedom rather than need becomes expansive and enduring. It allows both people to evolve without threat, to support without suffocating, and to give without losing. Trust and vulnerability form the foundation upon which real connection stands. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the courage to be seen, fully, imperfectly, authentically. When we hide behind emotional armor, we may feel safe, but we also feel alone. Connection requires risk, the risk of rejection, misunderstanding, and pain, but it also brings the reward of belonging. When two people dare to be vulnerable, they create a sacred space where truth can breathe. That space is intimacy in its purest forms, but emotional transparency. In that openness, empathy flourishes, and the walls that separate souls begin to fall. Modern life, with all its technology and convenience, has paradoxically made connection both easier and harder. We are more connected digitally than ever, yet more isolated emotionally. Relationships built on shallow communication often lack depth, and constant comparison erodes authenticity. Social media, while offering connection, often fosters illusion, the illusion that others are happier, stronger, or more loved. To preserve true connection, we must return to presence, to real conversation, eye contact, touch, and attention. The human heart cannot be nourished by pixels, it needs presence. The dynamics of relationships also reveal a deeper spiritual truth. Every connection is a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves we have yet to acknowledge or embrace. The people who challenge us the most often hold lessons we most need to learn. The friend who frustrates us may be showing us our impatience. The partner who withdraws may be awakening our fear of abandonment. The critic may be echoing the voice of our own insecurity. When we see relationships as opportunities for growth rather than arenas of blame, we transform them from sources of pain into paths of evolution. Ultimately, relationships are not about finding the perfect person, but about learning the perfect balance between love and understanding. Love without understanding is blind attachment. Understanding without love is cold observation. When both unite, connection becomes transformative. It heals wounds, awakens empathy, and expands consciousness. To connect deeply is to experience life in its richest form, to feel the pulse of humanity through another soul. Every relationship, no matter how brief or lasting, leaves us changed. The challenge and the gift of being human lie in learning to connect without losing ourselves, to love without clinging, and to walk together in the journey of becoming. For in the end, the measure of a life well lived is not found in achievements or possessions, but in the quality of the connections we nurture, those precious threads of love, trust, and understanding that remind us we are never truly alone. Chapter 10. Beneath the surface of conscious awareness lies a vast and mysterious realm, the subconscious mind, a silent architect shaping our perceptions, emotions, and behaviors with invisible precision. It is the unseen force behind habits, reactions, dreams, and instincts, guiding our lives in ways we rarely recognize. While we often believe we act from rational choice, research in psychology and neuroscience reveals that up to 95% of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are driven by subconscious programming. The subconscious mind functions like an operating system, continuously running the programs installed through experience, repetition, and emotion. Every word we heard as children, every belief we absorbed from our culture, every moment of joy or pain, all became data stored within this inner system, influencing who we are and how we act today. To master human behavior, one must first understand this hidden mind, for it is not logic but subconscious conditioning that truly directs our lives. The subconscious mind, unlike the analytical conscious mind, is not verbal or linear. It speaks in images, symbols, sensations, and emotions. It does not reason, it accepts. It records without judgment and obeys without question. Whatever is impressed upon it repeatedly or emotionally becomes its truth, and from that truth, it constructs the reality we experience. From birth to around the age of 7, the human brain operates primarily in theta and alpha frequencies, states of deep receptivity, imagination, and absorption. In this period, the subconscious mind is wide open, taking in impressions without filters. This is how a child learns language, social behavior, and identity with astonishing speed. Yet it is also when limiting beliefs, fears, and self-concepts are formed. A child repeatedly told they are not good enough or too much internalizes those words as subconscious truths, which later manifest as self-sabotage, anxiety, or perfectionism. Similarly, the child who grows up feeling loved and capable internalizes confidence and resilience. The subconscious does not distinguish between fact and fiction, truth and imagination. It believes what it is told and shown repeatedly. This is why visualization, affirmation, and emotional repetition are powerful tools for transformation. By consciously feeding the subconscious new ideas charged with emotion, we can reprogram the mind to support growth rather than limitation. Behavioral patterns are the visible expressions of subconscious conditioning. Habits of thought lead to habits of action, which in turn shape destiny. When an individual reacts with anger to criticism, withdraws in fear from new opportunities, or repeats toxic relationship cycles, it is rarely a conscious choice. It is the subconscious replaying familiar emotional scripts. These patterns serve a psychological purpose. They create a sense of safety through familiarity, even when they cause pain. The subconscious prefers what is known to what is uncertain, and thus it resists change, often sabotaging attempts to grow. This resistance is not malice, it is protection. To the subconscious, change equals danger. To transform behavior, one must therefore work not by force but by communication, by speaking the language of the subconscious through imagery, repetition, and emotion. Real change occurs when new patterns become more familiar than old ones. One of the most powerful aspects of the subconscious is its connection to the body. Every emotion, memory, and belief is stored not only in the brain, but also in the nervous system and muscles. The body becomes a physical reflection of the subconscious mind. This is why trauma manifests as tension, pain, or illness, and why healing the body can unlock repressed emotions. Psychologists and neuroscientists have discovered that subconscious reactions often occur milliseconds before conscious awareness, meaning we feel before we think. The subconscious perceives patterns, dangers, and meanings faster than the conscious mind, guiding us through intuition, gut feelings, and instinct. These intuitive messages, when trusted and understood, can serve as powerful tools for decision-making. However, when clouded by fear-based conditioning, they can also mislead us. The art lies in learning to discern between intuition, which is clear and calm, and subconscious fear, which is anxious and urgent. Dreams are another window into the subconscious. Symbolic stories woven from our inner conflicts, desires, and memories. Through dreams, the subconscious processes unresolved emotions and communicates through metaphor. Understanding these messages can reveal deep insights into one's emotional state and hidden motivations. Similarly, slips of the tongue, spontaneous reactions, and recurring thoughts often expose the subconscious at work. Nothing in our inner world happens randomly. Every thought and feeling points to a deeper pattern waiting to be understood. To master the subconscious, one must approach it with curiosity rather than control, compassion rather than criticism. The subconscious does not respond to judgment, it responds to direction and repetition. Reprogramming the subconscious involves consistent an emotionally charged repetition of new beliefs. Techniques such as meditation, hypnosis, affirmations, and visualization bypass the analytical filter of the conscious mind and directly access the subconscious. For example, visualizing success while feeling genuine confidence impresses the subconscious far more effectively than rational thought alone. Emotion is the gateway to subconscious change. It is the glue that binds ideas to identity. Therefore, any transformation that lacks emotional engagement fails to penetrate deeply. When we combine focused attention with emotion and repetition, we create new neural pathways that gradually replace old patterns. This process, known as neuroplasticity, demonstrates that the brain, and therefore the subconscious, is malleable throughout life. No belief or behavior is permanent. However, to truly reprogram the subconscious, awareness must precede action. One cannot change what one cannot see. Mindfulness, the act of observing thoughts and behaviors without judgment, brings subconscious patterns into conscious light. Every time we notice a reaction, a fear, or a recurring thought, we create a space between stimulus and response, and within that space lies freedom. The conscious mind must become the compassionate guide of the subconscious, not its critic. Healing and transformation occur when the two work in harmony, when the conscious sets intention and the subconscious executes with trust. The subconscious also governs our sense of identity. It holds the answer to the question, "Who am I?" A collection of stories, roles, and self-images shaped by years of repetition. If these stories are empowering, they create success and confidence. If they are limiting, they generate fear and stagnation. Changing behavior, therefore, requires changing identity at the subconscious level. Instead of forcing ourselves to act differently, we must first see ourselves differently. The person who identifies as disciplined naturally acts with consistency. The one who believes, "I am unlucky," unconsciously reinforces failure. The subconscious always seeks to prove itself right, aligning reality with belief. Thus, self-image becomes destiny. Ultimately, mastery of behavior comes from partnership with the subconscious mind. It is not an enemy to conquer, but an ally to understand. The subconscious is loyal, obedient, and unimaginably powerful. It gives us exactly what we repeatedly ask for, even when what we ask for is hidden beneath fear and doubt. When we consciously feed it visions of strength, peace, and abundance, it reshapes our reality to match. But when we feed it anxiety, guilt, and limitation, it creates obstacles to protect those beliefs. The subconscious is a perfect mirror, reflecting whatever we project upon it. To master human behavior is to take responsibility for that projection, to choose awareness over autopilot, creation over reaction. When the conscious and subconscious mind unite in harmony, life begins to flow with effortless alignment. Choices become clear, habits become empowering, and the outer world transforms as a reflection of inner change. For in the end, the greatest power we possess lies not in controlling life's circumstances, but in mastering the mind from which all behavior flows. The silent, infinite intelligence within that shapes our every thought, action, and destiny. Chapter 11. Emotional intelligence stands as one of the most powerful yet misunderstood forces shaping human behavior and success. It is not the brilliance of intellect nor the mastery of logic that determines the depth of one's impact, but the ability to understand, regulate, and express emotions, both one's own and those of others, with wisdom and grace. Emotional intelligence is the art of feeling consciously. It is the bridge between thought and behavior, between reaction and response, and between self and society. It transforms raw emotion into guided energy and converts chaos into clarity. The emotionally intelligent individual does not suppress emotion, nor does he become enslaved by it. Rather, he becomes its master, using emotion as a compass pointing toward deeper truth. Where traditional intelligence measures the capacity to solve problems, emotional intelligence measures the ability to navigate life itself, to build relationships, lead with empathy, and maintain inner balance in the midst of uncertainty. In the modern world, where stress, distraction, and emotional reactivity dominate daily life, emotional intelligence has become not only a skill but a necessity for peace and purpose. At its core, emotional intelligence consists of 4 dimensions: self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skill. Self-awareness is the foundation, the ability to recognize one's emotions as they arise, to identify their triggers, and to understand their influence on behavior. Without awareness, emotion becomes an invisible puppeteer controlling thought and action. The self-aware person observes anger before it erupts, fear before it paralyzes, and joy before it fades. This awareness transforms emotion from an unconscious reaction into a conscious signal, information about one's internal state and unmet needs. Every emotion, even the painful ones, carries wisdom. Anger reveals violated boundaries, sadness reflects loss or disconnection, anxiety warns of uncertainty or imbalance. By listening to emotions instead of rejecting them, we gain insight into ourselves. Self-awareness is the light that brings the subconscious into conscious view, the first step toward mastery. The second dimension, self-regulation, is the ability to manage one's emotional impulses with calm and control. It does not mean suppression. Suppressing emotions leads to tension and disconnection, but rather channeling emotional energy productively. The emotionally intelligent person feels deeply yet acts wisely. They can experience frustration without aggression, fear without paralysis, and disappointment without despair. This is the mark of true strength, not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. Regulation involves pausing before reacting, breathing before speaking, and thinking before acting. It means creating space between stimulus and response, where choice resides. In that space lies freedom, the freedom to choose understanding over anger, patience over impulsiveness, and empathy over ego. Such mastery transforms conflict into dialogue and suffering into growth. Empathy, the third pillar, expands emotional intelligence beyond the self. It is the ability to sense and understand what others feel, to see the world through their emotional lens. Empathy is not mere sympathy, feeling sorry for someone, but connection, the recognition of shared humanity. It dissolves judgment and fosters compassion, reminding us that every person's behavior is a reflection of their unseen pain or longing. When we practice empathy, we stop reacting to others' words and start responding to their needs. It allows leaders to inspire, parents to nurture, and partners to truly connect. Empathy bridges the emotional gap between individuals, creating trust and safety. It is the foundation of all meaningful relationships, for it transforms communication from transaction into connection. In a world increasingly divided by misunderstanding, empathy is the medicine that heals the heart of society. The final dimension, social skill, is the outward expression of emotional intelligence, the ability to manage relationships effectively, to communicate clearly, influence positively, and build harmony within groups. It is not manipulation but alignment, the capacity to guide emotions, one's own and others, toward constructive outcomes. People with strong social intelligence lead not through authority, but through presence. They make others feel seen, heard, and valued. They navigate difficult conversations with calm and resolve conflict without hostility. Their charisma stems not from charm but from authenticity. They are grounded in emotional awareness and radiate a sense of trust and stability that draws others naturally. Social skill is emotional intelligence in action, the dance between empathy and expression, connection and clarity. Self-mastery emerges when all 4 dimensions harmonize. It is the state where awareness guides emotion, emotion informs wisdom, and wisdom directs action. The self-mastered individual is not controlled by circumstance, they are guided by principle. They understand that they cannot always choose what happens, but they can always choose how to respond. This realization is liberation. It shifts focus from controlling the external world to mastering the internal one. Emotional intelligence thus becomes a spiritual practice as much as a psychological skill, a journey of integrating the fragmented self into wholeness. The emotionally intelligent person does not deny pain or chase pleasure. They observe both as passing waves within the ocean of consciousness. In this state, emotions become teachers, not tyrants. The science of emotional intelligence reveals that emotions are not obstacles to reasoning but essential to it. The brain's emotional center, the limbic system, and its rational center, the prefrontal cortex, are deeply interconnected. Emotions provide the motivation that drives decision-making. Logic provides the structure that guides it. When emotion overwhelms logic, when logic suppresses emotion, apathy follows. Balance between the two creates wisdom, the union of heart and mind. This integration is what emotional intelligence cultivates, the ability to feel deeply and think clearly at once. Developing emotional intelligence requires practice. It begins with self-reflection, observing one's emotional triggers and patterns without judgment. Meditation, journaling, and mindfulness sharpen this awareness. Next comes emotional regulation, achieved through grounding techniques such as deep breathing, reframing negative thoughts, and expressing emotion through healthy outlets. Empathy grows through active listening and curiosity about others' experiences, while social skill develops through honest communication and emotional transparency. The key is consistency. Emotional intelligence is not learned once but cultivated daily. It is a continuous process of learning from every emotional encounter. In relationships, emotional intelligence transforms interaction into connection. It allows couples to communicate needs without accusation, leaders to inspire without domination, and friends to support without judgment. In the workplace, it fosters collaboration and resilience. In personal life, it cultivates peace and authenticity. Emotional intelligence is the language of the soul, the ability to speak truth with compassion and to feel pain without losing perspective. It transforms leadership into service, success into fulfillment, and ambition into contribution. Ultimately, emotional intelligence is the art of living consciously, of being aware enough to feel fully, strong enough to respond wisely, and compassionate enough to understand deeply. It is the practice of transforming emotion into insight and reaction into purpose. The self-mastered individual does not escape emotion but embraces it as the pulse of life, using it to illuminate the path forward. In mastering emotion, we master ourselves, and in mastering ourselves, we learn to lead, to love, and to live with a calm strength that no external chaos can disturb. Emotional intelligence is not just a skill, it is the essence of human wisdom, the compass that guides the heart through the complexity of life with grace, resilience, and authenticity. CAPTR 12 Motivation is the spark that ignites human potential, the invisible force that moves us from intention to action, from dreaming to doing, and from stagnation to evolution. It is the inner current that propels every decision, every goal, and every act of creation. Without motivation, intelligence lies dormant and talent remains untapped. With it, even the seemingly impossible becomes achievable. To understand motivation is to understand the very engine of human behavior, why we strive, persist, and grow. Motivation arises from the interplay between internal drives and external influences, between the desire to avoid pain and the pursuit of pleasure, between survival instincts and the yearning for self-actualization. At its deepest level, motivation is the language of the soul, guiding us toward fulfillment, meaning, and mastery. Yet many wander through life disconnected from this inner fire, trapped in cycles of procrastination, fear, and self-doubt, not realizing that the key to motivation lies not in willpower alone, but in understanding the psychology that fuels it. Psychologists distinguish between two types of motivation: extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards, money, recognition, praise, or the avoidance of punishment. While powerful in the short term, extrinsic motivators often fail to sustain long-term growth because they depend on conditions outside the self. Intrinsic motivation, by contrast, arises from internal desire, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of progress, the passion for purpose. It is the purest form of motivation because it is self-sustaining. When one acts from intrinsic motivation, effort feels effortless, and work becomes an expression of identity. This is the state psychologists call flow, where time dissolves, focus sharpens, and the individual becomes fully immersed in the present moment. Flow occurs when challenge meets skill, when the task is neither too easy to bore nor too difficult to overwhelm. It is in this state that humans perform at their highest potential, not for reward, but for the sheer love of mastery. Yet the path to sustained motivation is not always smooth. The human mind is complex, often pulled between desire and resistance. Many people begin with enthusiasm but falter at the first sign of discomfort. This is because motivation is not constant. It fluctuates with emotion, energy, and belief. To maintain it, one must cultivate both clarity and resilience. Clarity gives direction, knowing not only what one wants but why it matters. Resilience gives endurance, the capacity to persist through setbacks and uncertainty. The strongest motivation is not driven by shallow desire but by deep purpose. When purpose anchors action, even failure becomes feedback rather than defeat. Purpose transforms struggle into significance. It aligns the mind, heart, and behavior into harmony, allowing motivation to evolve from fleeting inspiration into disciplined momentum. The roots of motivation lie in fundamental psychological needs identified by self-determination theory: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the need to feel in control of one's life, to make choices aligned with one's values. Competence is the desire to master challenges and experience growth. Relatedness is the human need for connection, to feel supported and valued. When these needs are fulfilled, motivation flourishes naturally. When they are denied, motivation deteriorates into apathy or rebellion. Environments that nurture freedom, learning, and belonging create self-driven individuals, while those that impose control and fear produce compliance without passion. Therefore, to sustain motivation, one must design both an internal mindset and an external environment that support these psychological needs. Another essential factor is belief, the unseen architecture of motivation. What we believe about ourselves determines what we attempt and how we persevere. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset revealed that individuals who believe abilities can be developed through effort and learning achieve far greater success than those with a fixed mindset, who believe talent is innate. The growth mindset transforms challenges into opportunities for improvement, viewing failure not as evidence of inadequacy but as a step toward mastery. This shift in belief ignites continuous motivation because it reframes effort as progress. Every obstacle becomes a lesson, every setback a signal to adapt. Motivation, therefore, is not about constant excitement but about sustained belief. The conviction that one's actions matter and improvement is possible. Emotion, too, plays a vital role in motivation. While logic can plan, it is emotion that compels. We act not because we think we should, but because we feel we must. Positive emotions such as enthusiasm, hope, and curiosity enhance motivation by broadening perception and energizing behavior. Negative emotions, when understood properly, also serve a purpose. Fear can sharpen focus, frustration can drive determination, and dissatisfaction can spark change. The key lies in emotional regulation, using emotion as fuel rather than allowing it to become a barrier. When we align emotional energy with purposeful action, motivation transforms from a fleeting impulse into a powerful, sustained force. Habits serve as the bridge between motivation and growth. While motivation starts action, habit sustains it. The most successful individuals do not rely on constant bursts of inspiration. They create systems that make discipline automatic. Habits are formed through repetition, by performing an action consistently until it becomes second nature. Neuroscience shows that repeated behavior strengthens neural pathways, making it easier to act without conscious effort. Thus, the key to lasting motivation is to automate progress. When behavior aligns with identity, when one no longer says, "I want to be disciplined," but "I am disciplined," growth becomes inevitable. Small, consistent actions compound into transformation. Personal growth, the ultimate aim of motivation, is not merely the accumulation of achievements but the evolution of consciousness. It is the process of becoming more aware, capable, and authentic. Growth requires discomfort because it demands that we outgrow our limitations. The cocoon must break for the butterfly to emerge. Each challenge we face invites us to expand, to strengthen willpower, refine thought, and deepen understanding. Motivation fuels this process, guiding us through fear toward freedom. Yet true growth does not come from chasing success, but from aligning with purpose. When we grow for the sake of becoming who we are meant to be, motivation becomes infinite. The psychology of motivation also teaches us that meaning magnifies drive. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, observed that those who endured unimaginable suffering did so not through strength alone but through purpose. Those who have a why, he wrote, can bear almost any how. When life feels directionless, motivation withers. When meaning is clear, even the hardest path becomes bearable. Thus, the greatest source of motivation lies in the question, why am I doing this? The answer fuels persistence, courage, and faith. In the end, motivation is not a mysterious force to be found, but a fire to be kindled. It lives within every human being, waiting for clarity, belief, and purpose to awaken it. Personal growth is the natural consequence of this awakening. The journey from survival to significance, from reaction to creation. To live motivated is to live consciously, aligning every action with one's highest values. The truly motivated person does not chase fleeting pleasure, but pursues meaningful progress. They understand that growth is not a destination but a continual unfolding, a lifelong dialogue between who we are and who we are becoming. Motivation, therefore, is not about speed but direction, not about competition but evolution. It is the quiet, persistent voice within that whispers, "You can become more." When we listen, nurture, and follow that voice, we step into the fullness of our potential. And in doing so, we not only transform ourselves but also inspire others to rise beyond their limitations. For the psychology of motivation is, at its heart, the psychology of becoming, the eternal pursuit of a better, wiser, and more awakened self. Chapter 13. The mind is the architect of reality, and within its invisible domain lies the power to shape destiny, transform pain into purpose, and turn obstacles into opportunities. Every thought we entertain, every belief we hold, becomes the blueprint from which our lives are constructed. This is the essence of mindset, the inner lens through which we perceive and interpret the world. It determines not only how we respond to challenges, but also what we believe is possible. A strong mind creates a strong life, while a fragile one collapses under the weight of adversity. Mental resilience, therefore, is the armor of the soul, the capacity to bend without breaking, to endure hardship without losing hope, and to rise again after every fall. Together, mindset and resilience form the foundation of all personal mastery. They are not gifts bestowed by fortune, but skills forged through awareness, intention, and persistence. To understand their power is to unlock the secret of human potential, that the quality of life is not defined by what happens to us, but by how we interpret and respond to it. Mindset is not simply optimism or positive thinking. It is a deep, internal belief system that governs perception and behavior. Carol Dweck's groundbreaking research on fixed and growth mindsets revealed that people who believe intelligence and ability are static tend to avoid challenges, fear failure, and give up easily, while those who believe abilities can be developed through effort and learning embrace obstacles as opportunities for growth. The difference lies not in talent but in perception. A growth mindset transforms "I can't" into "I can learn." It shifts focus from proving oneself to improving oneself. With such a mindset, failure loses its sting, for it is no longer an endpoint but a stepping stone. Every setback becomes feedback, every mistake a lesson, and every difficulty a teacher. This way of thinking liberates the individual from the prison of fear, allowing them to move boldly into the unknown. Mental resilience is the muscle that strengthens mindset through adversity. Life inevitably tests us through loss, rejection, disappointment, and change. These moments reveal our inner architecture. While some crumble under pressure, Others emerge stronger, not because they avoid pain, but because they face it consciously. Resilience is not the absence of suffering, it is the mastery of recovery. It is built when we learn to regulate our thoughts and emotions in the midst of turmoil, to remain centered when everything else feels uncertain. The resilient mind does not deny hardship but reinterprets it, seeing crisis as a call to evolve, pain as a teacher, and difficulty as a forge for inner strength. The Japanese have a term, kintsugi, meaning golden repair, referring to the art of mending broken pottery with gold, making the object more beautiful for having been broken. Resilience is the psychological kintsugi of the soul, the ability to rise with wisdom, courage, and grace, more whole than before. One of the greatest determinants of resilience is self-talk, the silent dialogue that runs through the mind. The words we speak to ourselves become the beliefs that shape our experience. When faced with challenge, the mind can whisper defeat or determination. The resilient individual chooses the latter, consciously reframing adversity as opportunity. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What is this teaching me?" This shift from victimhood to empowerment changes everything. Neuroscience confirms that thoughts create neural pathways. Repeated negative thinking strengthens circuits of fear and helplessness, while positive solution-oriented thinking rewires the brain for strength and adaptability. The more we focus on possibility, the more our mind learns to seek solutions rather than obstacles. Thus, resilience is not innate toughness but practiced perspective. Resilient people share a common trait: emotional flexibility. They allow themselves to feel pain without being consumed by it. They acknowledge fear, sadness, or anger, but they do not dwell there. Instead, they process emotion, learn from it, and move forward. Emotional resilience grows from acceptance, the understanding that discomfort is a natural part of growth. Resistance to pain amplifies suffering, while acceptance transforms it into power. Those who endure life's storms with grace are not unfeeling, they are grounded in self-awareness. They understand that emotion is transient, that no feeling is final, and that every dark night eventually gives way to dawn. A powerful mindset also requires vision, the ability to focus on purpose rather than circumstance. When vision is clear, challenges become part of the journey rather than reasons to quit. The resilient mind looks beyond temporary struggle to long-term growth. It asks not, "How hard is this?" but "Who will I become through this?" This focus on growth over comfort is what separates those who merely survive from those who thrive. History's greatest achievers, from inventors to leaders to reformers, were not immune to failure or hardship. They simply refused to let those experiences define them. They cultivated a mindset of relentless adaptability, transforming adversity into fuel for evolution. Another cornerstone of resilience is gratitude. While it may seem simple, gratitude rewires the mind to notice abundance rather than lack. It shifts focus from what has been lost to what remains, from despair to hope. Grateful individuals recover faster from setbacks because they maintain perspective. They find meaning even in pain. Gratitude does not deny suffering, it redefines it. It reminds the mind that even in hardship, there is something to learn, something to cherish, something to give. The resilient heart knows that appreciation is not reserved for easy days, but is most powerful on difficult ones. Mental resilience also thrives on self-discipline, the daily practice of doing what must be done even when motivation fades. Discipline is the bridge between intention and achievement. While emotion fluctuates, disciplined action sustains progress. The resilient mind understands that consistency, not intensity, builds strength. Every act of persistence trains the brain to endure discomfort, to replace excuses with effort, and to find pride in perseverance. Resilience is not built in grand moments of triumph, but in the quiet repetitions of courage. The decision to try again when no one is watching, to rise one more time after failure, to keep faith when results have yet to appear. Furthermore, mindset and resilience are deeply intertwined with meaning. Viktor Frankl observed that those who find purpose in suffering can endure almost any circumstance. When life's trials are framed within a greater purpose, pain becomes bearable because it is no longer senseless. Meaning transforms endurance into evolution. The resilient person asks, "How can I use this?" rather than "Why me?" This question shifts perspective from helplessness to creativity. It allows even the most difficult experiences to serve as catalysts for personal transformation. In the end, the power of mindset and mental resilience lies in their ability to free us from the tyranny of circumstance. A resilient mindset does not promise a life free of struggle, but it ensures that struggle will never break the spirit. It teaches us that adversity does not define us, our response to it does. When we cultivate a growth-oriented, purposeful, and disciplined mindset, we become unshakable. Life's storms may bend us, but they cannot uproot us. Our challenges become chapters of strength, our failures seeds of wisdom, and our perseverance the measure of our humanity. The mind, once mastered, becomes the greatest ally, capable of turning every trial into transformation. For resilience is not about avoiding the fall, but about learning how to rise again and again with deeper understanding, greater strength, and unwavering faith in the boundless power within. Saptar thought human beings are social creatures intricately wired to connect, communicate, and coexist. From birth, our survival and growth depend upon our relationships. First with parents, then with peers, communities, and societies. Understanding social dynamics is therefore not merely an intellectual pursuit, but a fundamental key to mastering life itself. Every interaction we have, from casual conversations to complex negotiations, shapes our identity, our emotions, and our outcomes. Social dynamics represent the invisible forces that govern human behavior in groups, the unspoken rules, psychological cues, and emotional exchanges that determine how people influence and are influenced by one another. At its core, it is the study of power, perception, empathy, and communication. To navigate the social world effectively, one must learn to read beneath the surface, to interpret tone, body language, and social context, for these are the languages of influence. The mastery of human interaction is not about manipulation or dominance. It is about awareness, authenticity, and adaptability. It is the ability to understand what drives people, how they connect, and how relationships evolve under the constant push and pull of emotions, expectations, and environments. At the heart of all social interaction lies one simple truth: people seek to be understood, valued, and respected. Every human being carries invisible needs for recognition, belonging, and validation. When these needs are met, trust flourishes. When ignored, defensiveness arises. This is why emotional intelligence is the foundation of social mastery. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing and managing one's own emotions while perceiving and responding appropriately to the emotions of others. It is the awareness that communication is not merely about words but about emotional resonance. Two people may exchange sentences, but connection happens only when there is understanding beyond language, a mutual recognition of feeling. The most socially adept individuals are those who listen not just with their ears, but with their presence, who observe the subtleties of facial expressions, posture, and energy, and who respond with empathy rather than judgment. They understand that every behavior is an expression of an unmet need, every outburst a signal of inner conflict, and every silence a form of communication. In social dynamics, perception is power. How others perceive us often dictates how they respond to us. Confidence, warmth, and authenticity create an aura of respect and approachability. Yet these qualities are not about acting but about alignment. When one's inner world matches their outer expression, people can sense congruence. They can also sense pretense. Authenticity, therefore, becomes magnetic. It invites trust and fosters openness. However, authenticity must be balanced with social intelligence, the awareness of context and timing. What is appropriate in one situation may be disastrous in another. Socially intelligent individuals adapt fluidly, reading the environment and adjusting their tone, language, and energy to fit the moment without losing integrity. They understand the dynamics of power and status, when to lead, when to listen, when to assert, and when to yield. True social power lies not in domination but in adaptability, in the ability to create harmony within difference. Another pillar of social dynamics is influence, the ability to shape outcomes by shaping emotions. Influence is not coercion, it is persuasion through understanding. It is knowing that people rarely act on logic alone, they act on how they feel. To influence effectively, one must align their message with the listener's values and emotions. This requires empathy and perspective taking, the capacity to see through another's eyes. The most persuasive communicators are not those who talk the most, but those who make others feel most understood. Influence also involves reciprocity, the social principle that people naturally return the treatment they receive. Kindness inspires kindness, respect invites respect, and trust builds trust. This is why manipulative tactics eventually fail. They violate authenticity and erode reciprocity. Sustainable influence comes from integrity, from the consistent alignment between word, action, and intention. Social interaction also depends heavily on nonverbal communication, the silent language that constitutes most of human expression. Tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, and posture all communicate far more than words. A single look can convey admiration, doubt, or disapproval. A change in tone can shift the entire meaning of a sentence. To master social dynamics, one must become fluent in these subtle signals, both in sending and interpreting them. Likewise, proxemics, the study of personal space, reveals how comfort and dominance are negotiated physically. Standing too close may signal aggression or intimacy, too far may signal distance or disinterest. Understanding these invisible social boundaries allows one to interact gracefully, respecting the comfort zones of others while maintaining their own. Within groups, social behavior follows certain patterns shaped by status, conformity, and cohesion. Humans, as tribal beings, are sensitive to hierarchy and belonging. In any social setting, from families to corporations, unspoken hierarchies emerge, and behavior adjusts accordingly. Some seek leadership, others seek approval, and many simply seek inclusion. Awareness of these patterns enables one to navigate them wisely. Group dynamics often amplify emotions. Individuals behave differently when they are part of a collective. The desire for acceptance can lead people to conform, even against their better judgment, a phenomenon famously demonstrated by Solomon Asch's conformity experiments. To maintain authenticity in such contexts requires courage, the ability to think independently while remaining socially connected. The socially intelligent person knows when to blend in for harmony and when to stand out for integrity. Conflict, an inevitable part of social life, becomes a test of emotional and social skill. Most conflicts arise not from disagreement but from miscommunication, from unspoken assumptions, unmet expectations, or emotional reactivity. The key to resolving conflict lies in understanding before responding. Listening, paraphrasing, and validating emotions diffuse defensiveness and open pathways to collaboration. The goal of conflict resolution is not victory but understanding, transforming opposition into opportunity. Those who master this skill elevate their relationships from transactional to transformational, for they create spaces where honesty and empathy coexist. Cultural and contextual intelligence also plays a vital role in social dynamics. Every society, community, and group carries its own unwritten rules, norms, values, and taboos. What signals respect in one culture may appear rude in another. Thus, effective interaction demands cultural sensitivity and humility, the ability to suspend judgment, observe carefully, and adapt respectfully bridges divides and fosters connection across diversity. In a globalized world, social mastery depends not only on interpersonal skill, but also on intercultural understanding, the awareness that humanity expresses itself in countless ways, yet the emotional core remains universal. Ultimately, understanding social dynamics is about cultivating harmony, both within oneself and in relation to others. It requires balancing authenticity with empathy, confidence with humility, and individuality with cooperation. Those who master it do not manipulate crowds or chase approval. They inspire trust through presence, understanding, and integrity. They move through social spaces with ease because they understand that connection is not about control, but about resonance. True mastery of human interaction is not learned from technique alone, but from awareness. The awareness that every person we meet reflects a part of ourselves. To understand others deeply, we must first understand our own motivations, biases, and insecurities. When we do, social life transforms from a battlefield of egos into a dance of understanding, a dynamic, ever-evolving exchange of energy and empathy. The psychology of social interaction, therefore, teaches us that the essence of humanity lies not in isolation but in connection. To know oneself is the beginning of social intelligence. To know others through empathy is the fulfillment of it. When these two dimensions unite, the individual becomes not just socially competent but socially enlightened, capable of influencing with wisdom, leading with compassion, and living in harmony with the vast, interconnected web of human experience. CR 15. The journey towards social intelligence, mastery, and emotional wisdom is the highest form of personal evolution. The transformation of raw instinct into conscious awareness, of reaction into understanding, and of emotion into empathy. It is the art of mastering oneself to connect deeply with others. Where emotional intelligence governs how we manage our inner world, social intelligence determines how we navigate the outer one. Together, they form the bridge between self-awareness and harmonious relationships, between personal peace and collective progress. To master them is to live in alignment, to understand not only what we feel, but why others feel as they do, and how those feelings shape behavior, decisions, and destiny. Emotional wisdom is the ability to sense the rhythm of human emotion, to dance with it rather than resist it, and to respond with compassion even when challenged. It is the realization that connection is the essence of life, and that every meaningful interaction is an opportunity for growth, healing, and transformation. Social intelligence mastery begins with awareness, the ability to observe human behavior without judgment. It requires studying people not through assumptions but through curiosity. The socially intelligent person listens between words, noticing subtle shifts in tone, energy, and intention. They see patterns where others see confusion. They recognize that behind every behavior lies a motive, a desire to be heard, understood, or valued. This awareness allows them to respond wisely rather than react impulsively. Social mastery, therefore, is not about control but about alignment, aligning one's communication, presence, and actions with the emotional landscape of others. It is empathy in motion, the ability to feel what another feels without losing one's center. Emotional wisdom enhances this process by grounding empathy in discernment, the ability to care deeply while maintaining healthy boundaries. Without boundaries, empathy becomes absorption. With them, it becomes strength. Emotional wisdom is knowing when to listen and when to let go, when to comfort and when to challenge, when to speak and when silence is the greater teacher. At the foundation of emotional wisdom lies self-awareness, the understanding of one's own emotional triggers, patterns, and tendencies. Many people attempt to master relationships without first mastering themselves, but the two are inseparable. One cannot lead others emotionally while lost in their own reactions. Emotional wisdom begins the moment we take responsibility for our feelings instead of blaming others for them. It is the practice of noticing the sensations of anger, jealousy, or fear, not as enemies but as signals, messengers from within pointing toward unmet needs or unresolved pain. By listening to these signals without resistance, we gain mastery over them. When we understand ourselves, we become less reactive, more compassionate, and infinitely more effective in understanding others. The path to social intelligence mastery is also the path of humility. To interact wisely is to accept that every person we meet knows something we do not, sees from a perspective we cannot, and carries experiences we may never fully understand. The socially intelligent individual approaches others not with superiority but with openness. They know that judgment closes doors while curiosity opens them. This humility makes them magnetic, for it communicates safety, the foundation of all genuine connection. People open up to those who make them feel seen without being judged. They trust those who can hold space for their emotions without trying to fix or dominate them. Such individuals are rare, for they have learned the art of emotional presence, being fully with another person, without agenda, without distraction, simply witnessing their humanity. This presence is the true hallmark of emotional wisdom, and it is more powerful than any technique or persuasion skill. Communication in the realm of social intelligence becomes an art form. Words are tools, but tone, timing, and intention are the essence. The emotionally wise communicator knows that what is said matters less than how it is said. They tailor their message not by manipulation, but by sensitivity, understanding the emotional state of their listener. They know that influence begins with empathy, not argument. When people feel understood, they naturally open to new perspectives. This is why emotional wisdom is the heart of leadership, counseling, teaching, and love. It allows truth to be spoken in ways that heal rather than harm. The master of social intelligence does not seek to win conversations, but to connect through them. They understand that every dialogue is a mirror, reflecting the level of consciousness each person brings to it. Another key element of emotional wisdom is regulation, the ability to remain centered in emotional turbulence. Life will always present moments of conflict, frustration, and uncertainty. The difference between reaction and wisdom lies in the pause. The pause is the space between stimulus and response, the sacred moment where awareness chooses its path. In that space, emotional mastery is born. The wise do not suppress emotions, they transmute them. They transform anger into assertiveness, fear into alertness, and sadness into compassion. They use emotion as energy, directing it toward understanding rather than destruction. This self-regulation radiates calmness, creating emotional safety for others. In this state, one becomes not only a participant in social interaction, but a stabilizing force within it. Someone who brings clarity where there is confusion, peace where there is tension, and understanding where there is division. Empathy, emotional regulation, and self-awareness together give rise to intuition, the silent intelligence of the heart that perceives truth without analysis. Intuition allows socially intelligent individuals to sense when someone is hiding pain behind a smile, when words conceal deeper meaning, or when timing requires patience instead of persuasion. Intuition, however, is not mystical. It is the refined perception that comes from years of observation and emotional honesty. It grows in the soil of mindfulness, the practice of being fully present. The more one lives in awareness, the more intuitive one becomes. Emotional wisdom thus integrates the heart and mind, blending reason with feeling, logic with compassion. It transcends emotional impulsivity while honoring emotional truth. The path to mastery also involves compassion, not the soft compassion of pity, but the active compassion of understanding. It is the recognition that everyone is fighting invisible battles, and that kindness can transform the social atmosphere more profoundly than power ever could. Compassion is the language of emotionally wise souls. It connects beyond difference, dissolves ego, and heals separation. It does not mean agreeing with everyone or tolerating toxicity. It means seeing through the pain that drives destructive behavior and responding with strength guided by empathy. True compassion balances firmness with love. It speaks truth not to wound but to awaken. Ultimately, social intelligence, mastery, and emotional wisdom lead to harmony, the ability to live authentically while coexisting peacefully with others. It is the integration of independence and interdependence. The socially and emotionally wise person no longer sees the world as a competition of egos, but as a collaboration of souls. They move through life with grace, aware that every encounter is an exchange of energy, every relationship a mirror of growth. They embody the calm of understanding and the power of authenticity. Their presence itself becomes influence, a quiet force that uplifts others simply by being centered and aware. The final realization on this path is that emotional wisdom is not an achievement but a practice, a lifelong commitment to awareness, empathy, and growth. It is the continual refinement of perception, the daily discipline of understanding oneself and others with compassion. Mastery is not perfection, it is presence. It is the ability to remain kind in conflict, calm in chaos, and conscious in confusion. Those who reach this level of awareness become beacons in a disconnected world, teachers not by words but by example, leading through emotional integrity and social grace. They understand that true intelligence is not measured by how much one knows, but by how deeply one feels, understands, and connects. For in the end, the mastery of social intelligence and emotional wisdom is the mastery of humanity itself, the art of living in harmony with others while remaining in peace with oneself, a dance between mind and heart that turns every interaction into an